Okay, boys, so today we're investigating who killed game ownership. But before we can figure out how we got here, we have to go back. Back to a time when buying a video game meant something completely different. For decades, if you wanted to buy a game, you'd walk into the store. Maybe it was GameStop, Best Buy, or Walmart, but regardless, you'd walk into the store, you'd walk down the aisle, you'd pick up the case, you'd flip it over, you read it, and you'd decide whether or not you wanted to spend your hard-earned money on it. Or like me back in the day, going with my mom or my dad and trying to convince them why I absolutely had to have the new Elder Scrolls, or why I had to have Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, or the new Halo. And this little disc or cartridge, it contained the whole game, and you would take it home and you would pop that sucker in and just start ripping into it. Many years later, you would have to install it to your console or have updates saved to the console, but you still had a physical copy in your hands and on your shelf, and that meant something. Think back to all the fond memories you had playing on the NES or the Sega Genesis, and then the PlayStation 1 or the original Xbox, or maybe it was the GameCube. And then came the first of the next-gen consoles, the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox 360, which sparked the original console wars. Every generation came with a new set of games to add to that shelf. And it wasn't just the games itself. Some came with cool little instruction manuals or fold-out maps. And then you had the collector's editions and the art books and the poster. And all of this added to the hype of actually getting your hands on that special game. Those weren't just the shelves where their games were stored. They were different memories, different friends, different summer, a different late night gaming session, a late night LAN party with the boys playing Halo. I still remember walking into the GameStop with my parents and them telling me that I only had enough money to get one game, and spending a half an hour looking over two games trying to figure out which one I wanted to get, because I knew I wouldn't get another one for a while. And the real excitement wasn't buying it or even getting home with it. It was opening it up and popping it in for the first time and playing it and experiencing it with the boys. That experience, it felt special. People waited in line for midnight releases. Friends met up outside game store. Entire communities formed around launch nights. And buying game wasn't just a transaction. It was an event. That's one thing that I think back to now, and I feel bad for the kids nowadays who will never experience one of those midnight launches. I remember going to the midnight release of Halo 3, and it was an experience like no other. The hype, all the people there for the same reason, and then everybody would get their game at midnight and take it home and start playing, linking up with the boys in the party and starting to experience it. And maybe the biggest difference of all, when you bought a game, you could lend it to a friend, you could trade it, you could store it away on a shelf for 20 years or pass it down to somebody. So let me ask you something. What's one game you'll never get rid of? For me, it would probably be Left 4 Dead 2. Let me know in the comments. So if physical games meant so much to players, then why does it seem like the gaming industry is moving away from this then? Physical games didn't disappear overnight. There wasn't one meeting where all the companies decided to stop selling discs. It happened one step at a time. Way back in 2003, Valve launched something that most gamers hated at the time, and that was the first online gaming marketplace. It wasn't like today where Valve and Steam are highly regarded by gamers. Most of it was because back then the internet was in its early stages, and the internet speeds were basically worthless. Most people back then were using dial-up or early forms of broadband internet. Y'all remember this sound? Yeah, that one. The one that's basically a meme at this point. On top of that, computers had a very limited storage capacity, and most people didn't really trust buying things online back then. Not like today, where most people buy stuff from Amazon or anywhere online. But Steam and Valve were the actual pioneers introducing and implementing a lot of the different ideas that feel very normal in gaming these days. They were the first to allow you to buy your games right from the comfort of your own room and download them instantly. And within your digital library on Steam, you had cloud saves and automatic updates, all the things that gave people convenience. It wasn't perfect, but it solved the problems that physical games couldn't. It didn't take long for the console makers, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, to all take notice. From a business perspective, it all seemed to make sense. It gave these companies lower manufacturing and shipping costs because they no longer had to manufacture a physical game, and it left them with fewer unsold copies of the game. It allowed them to do instant patches and open them up to a global market. And by making the switch to digital, they can maintain a stranglehold over the pricing. No more used game markets, allowing the pricing to fluctuate and in most cases go down. It kept the money in the hands of the producers and the developers and out of the hands of the retailers and the gamers. For publishers, digital wasn't just convenient. It fundamentally changed the economics of selling games. But something else changed. When games became digital, ownership became a little more complicated. At first, digital felt like a bonus. Eventually, it became the default. And here's where our investigation takes a turn. Digital games solved a lot of problems. They were faster, cheaper to distribute, easier to update, and more convenient. So if digital solved so many problems, then why are gamers suddenly so worried? So here's where things get interesting. When you click buy on a digital storefront, what exactly are you buying? Most of us, we think we're buying a game, but legally, that's not often how it's described. When you buy a digital game, you're typically purchasing a license to access and use that software under that platform's terms, not ownership of the software's intellectual property. That doesn't mean that your game is about to disappear tomorrow, though. Most digital games continue working just fine, but it does mean that your rights are defined by the platform's agreement, rather than simply by possessing a physical copy. And that's a very important distinction. When Ubisoft shut down the servers for The Crew, the game became unplayable because it required an online connection. If you already owned games when the Nintendo Wii shop closed down, you could generally continue downloading them for a period of time after the store closed, but you couldn't make any new purchases. Like older Forza titles, sometimes games disappear from stores because licenses expire. The people who own the game after the license expired can still download and play the game, but any new purchases of the game would not be allowed from that point on. Most of these decisions aren't necessarily about taking games away from the players. They're usually driven by licensing agreements, server costs, or other business realities, or simply biting off more than they can chew. Or maybe just creating a bad game. So if companies aren't necessarily trying to take our games, then why are so many gamers worried? Don't get me wrong, I love the convenience of online games. I buy them all the time. But I also understand why gamers would want to have a physical copy sitting on their shelf, or why they wouldn't want platforms dictating what they can do with the purchasing of that game through a licensing agreement. But if these games shut down and they only exist licensed and not owned, then they're essentially killed, and no other future generation can play the game or learn from the mistakes of a bad game. So the real question is, if gamers still value ownership, then why is the industry moving in this direction? The answer isn't just one thing. It's a combination of factors that all led us here to this point. The first reason game ownership changed is because gamers voted with their wallets. They preferred midnight releases right from their home, with no trips to GameStop required. No installing the game after you pop the disc in, no day one updates, just fast download speeds as soon as the game released, and the ability to browse the store right from the comfort of your own home. And publishers, they noticed. Every used game sold meant less new games sold. Publishers made $0 from used copies, while retailers profited, players saved money, and well, publishers, they really didn't like that, did they? So naturally, this led them to lean into digital sales. At a certain point, games stopped being a one and done. Launch the game, and they're done. Maybe a couple updates, maybe some expansions, but otherwise, that was it. you had the game. To where we are now, launch the game, updates, battle passes, seasonal content, and years of support. Games like Fortnite and Rainbow Six Siege. Publishers increasingly think of games as long-term platforms now instead of one-time purchases. Another factor that led to this was the rise of subscription services. We all know them. Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, EA Play, Ubisoft Plus, Spotify, Netflix, the list goes on. Everything these days seems to have become a subscription service. The consumers got used to saying, I don't own Netflix, I don't own Spotify, but I don't really care. I have access to the content. I have access to the music on Spotify. I have access to the games because of Xbox Game Pass. And so to me, that's okay. And the final factor that led us to this point is that the creation of digital ecosystems tended to lock customers in. When your library is 500 digital games on the same platform, it makes switching platforms much harder, and it becomes less about the hardware and more about the ecosystem. You have all of your achievements, your friends, your purchases, subscriptions, your cloud saves, your digital libraries, all saved on one account. But at what point does convenience become dependence? That's the question. None of these changes happened overnight. No single company killed game ownership. It was thousands of small decisions by businesses and by us. So boys, let's answer the question. Who actually killed game ownership? Was it PlayStation? Well, no. Was it Xbox? No. Was it Steam? No, I don't think so. Was it Rockstar? No, it wasn't Rockstar. Was it greedy publishers? Well, not entirely. The truth is, it changed because of thousands of business decisions and millions of consumer choices. Players wanted convenience, publishers wanted lower costs, developers required larger budgets, digital storefronts became easier. Subscription services changed everything, and live service games, they changed what a game even was. And little by little, buying a game stopped meaning what it once was. Okay, so here's where I stand. I love digital games. I buy them all the time. They're convenient, they're faster, and honestly, they're hard to beat. But I also think gamers gave up more than we realized. Not all at once. One convenience at a time. Maybe game ownership wasn't stolen. It was traded, one download at a time. Technology changes, business models change, even gaming changes. But one thing that doesn't change, gamers still care. And as long as gamers keep asking the questions, this conversation, well, it isn't over yet. So, to conclude this investigation, boys, gaming ownership wasn't killed by one single company. It disappeared through thousands of decisions, each made on their own. But the real question, boys, isn't who killed game ownership, because it's still there. It's whether or not the original chuds are willing to let it disappear completely. Okay, boys, so that's where this investigation comes to an end. But the conversation over game ownership is far from over. The industry is changing, but gamers are asking more questions than ever. And I have a feeling that this won't be the last time we open up a case on this subject. But now, I want to hear from you, boys. Do you think we actually own our games? Or do you think we're paying for access? And what should I investigate next? Leave your thoughts and case suggestions in the comments below. But if you enjoyed this investigation, don't forget to give the video a like, subscribe, and join me in the next one, boys. But for now, this case file is officially closed. Now it's time to find the next mystery, boys.